8 months after a gas station arrest that drew national attention, the former officer involved has been sentenced to 15 years in prison. A jury convicted 34-year-old Ryan Keller last month of assault and violating civil rights for using excessive force against a woman he wrongly pulled over. Today, a judge handed down the maximum sentence.
The Shell station on the corner of Martin Luther King Boulevard and Highway 78 had been a fixture in Decatur, Georgia for more than 30 years. One of those places where locals stopped to fill their tanks and grab coffee on the way to work, where teenagers gathered on weekend nights to show off their cars, where the rhythms of the community played out in small daily transactions. It sat at the edge of a neighborhood that had changed dramatically over the decades, gentrifying block by block, old families mixing uneasily with new arrivals, the tensions of a city in transition simmering just beneath the surface of everyday life. On a Thursday evening in late September, as the summer heat finally began to release its grip on Atlanta's eastern suburbs, the station was moderately busy. Commuters stopped for gas on their way home from work. A few teenagers clustered near the air pump, laughing about something on their phones. An elderly man in overalls methodically cleaned the windshield of his pickup truck, taking his time, savoring the ritual. It was an ordinary evening, the kind that blurred into all the other ordinary evenings, unremarkable in every way, until it wasn't. Sergeant First Class Jasmine Washington pulled her black Dodge Charger into the station at approximately 6:47 p.m., sliding into an open spot at pump number 4. She was tired, the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that came from 18 hours of travel across 3 time zones, her body still operating on Afghanistan time even though she had landed at Hartsfield-Jackson 4 hours ago. The flight from Bagram had been long and uncomfortable, packed with soldiers returning from deployment, everyone eager to get home but too drained to show much enthusiasm. Jasmine had served 14 years in the United States Army, the last 8 with the 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta, known to the public as Delta Force and to those who served in it simply as the unit. At 36 years old, she was one of the most decorated female operators in the history of special operations, having participated in missions across the Middle East, Africa, and Southeast Asia that would remain classified for decades. She had been shot twice, had earned a Silver Star for actions in Syria that saved the lives of 6 American hostages, and had recently completed a 6-month deployment that had tested every limit of her physical and mental endurance. None of that was visible as she stepped out of her car that evening. She was wearing civilian clothes, jeans, and a simple white blouse, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, her military bearing softened by exhaustion and the relief of finally being home. She looked like any other woman stopping for gas on a Thursday evening. Maybe a professional on her way home from work. Maybe a mother running errands before picking up kids. The only hint of her true identity was the faded army t-shirt visible through her partially unbuttoned blouse. And even that could have belonged to a spouse or a brother or anyone. She inserted her credit card into the pump, selected regular unleaded, and began filling her tank. The gas flowed with the familiar gurgling sound, and Jasmine leaned against her car, letting her eyes close for just a moment, allowing herself to relax for the first time in what felt like months. The peace lasted approximately 90 seconds. "Hey, you! What do you think you're doing?" The voice cut through the ambient noise of the station, sharp and aggressive, demanding attention. Jasmine opened her eyes and turned toward the source, expecting to find someone addressing a situation that had nothing to do with her. Instead, she found a police officer walking directly toward her, his face flushed with anger, his hand already resting on the grip of his service weapon. He was white, early 40s, with a thick build that had probably been muscular in his 20s, but had since softened into something less defined. His uniform was that of the DeKalb County Police Department, his badge catching the light from the station's overhead canopy. His name tag read Thornton, and everything about his posture radiated hostility. "I'm filling up my car, officer. Is there a problem?" Thornton stopped a few feet from her, his eyes sweeping over her car, the pump, cataloging everything with the practiced suspicion of someone who had learned to see threats everywhere. "This your vehicle?" "Yes, sir." "Registration?" "Current?" "Yes, sir." "You got insurance?" Jasmine felt a familiar tension beginning to build in her shoulders, the recognition of a situation that was heading in a direction she had experienced before. She had dealt with officers like this throughout her life. Men who saw her black skin and assumed the worst, who couldn't reconcile her presence in a nice car or a nice neighborhood with their preconceptions about who belonged where. "Officer, I'm happy to provide my license, registration, and insurance if you have a reason to ask for them. May I ask what this is about?" Thornton's eyes narrowed. "What this is about is I'm asking you questions and you're giving me attitude. That's what this is about." "I'm not giving you attitude, sir. I'm asking why you've approached me. I was simply filling my gas tank. Simply filling your gas tank. He repeated her words with exaggerated mockery. In a car that matches the description of a vehicle involved in a robbery 2 hours ago. Jasmine kept her expression neutral, though she knew immediately that this was a pretext. Her Charger was black and common, the kind of vehicle that matched descriptions whenever an officer needed a reason to stop someone they had decided to harass. I've been traveling all day, officer. I just landed at the airport a few hours ago. I have my boarding pass if you'd like to see it. You've been traveling. Again, the mocking tone. Traveling where? I'm returning from overseas military deployment. Thornton laughed, a harsh sound without humor. Military deployment, right. Let me guess, you're some kind of general or something. I'm a sergeant first class in the United States Army, currently assigned to Fort Bragg. Fort Bragg. He shook his head, the disbelief evident. Look, I don't know what kind of scam you're running, but I've heard enough. License and registration. Now. Jasmine took a slow breath, centering herself. She had been trained to remain calm under conditions that would break most people, to think clearly when her life was in danger, to make rational decisions when every instinct screamed for action. This was not Afghanistan. This was not a combat zone. This was a gas station in Georgia, and the man in front of her was a police officer, however poorly he was behaving. My purse is in the car, on the front seat. I'm going to reach inside to get it. Keep your hands where I can see them. I can't get my license without reaching into the car, officer. Don't. Get smart with me. The contradiction was absurd, but Jasmine didn't point that out. She simply moved slowly and deliberately, opening her car door, reaching for her purse on the passenger seat, keeping her movements visible and predictable. She had given this same advice to countless young soldiers, had taught them how to survive encounters with law enforcement in a country that too often saw their skin color as a threat. She retrieved her wallet and turned back to Thornton, holding it open to show her license. Here's my license. My registration is in the glove compartment. May I get it? Thornton snatched the wallet from her hand without answering, examining the license with his flashlight despite the ample lighting of the gas station canopy. His lips moved as he read the information, his brow furrowing as if the details didn't match whatever story he had constructed in his mind. Jasmine, Washington. Fort Bragg, North Carolina. He looked up at her. This says you're 36. You look older. Thank you for that observation, officer. The sarcasm was a mistake. She knew it the moment the words left her mouth, knew that she had allowed her exhaustion and frustration to override her judgment. Thornton's face darkened, his hand tightening around her wallet. What did you say to me? Nothing, officer. May I please have my wallet back? You think you're clever? You think you're better than me because you claim to be in the military? I don't think I'm better than anyone. Sir, I just want to finish filling my tank and go home. You'll go home when I say you can go home. He grabbed her arm, his fingers digging into her bicep with unnecessary force. Jasmine felt her training kick in, the automatic assessment of threats and options that had kept her alive through 14 years of service. She could disable this man in seconds. She could have him on the ground, his weapon secured, before he even understood what was happening. But doing so would make her the criminal, would transform this encounter from harassment into assault on a police officer, would end her career and possibly her freedom. So she did what she had trained herself to do. She endured. Officer, you're hurting me. I'm conducting an investigation. Stop resisting. I'm not resisting. My arm is at my side. I'm not moving. I said stop resisting. His other hand came up and closed around her throat. The world narrowed to the pressure on her windpipe, the sudden difficulty of drawing breath, the animal panic that came with being choked regardless of training or experience. Jasmine's hands came up instinctively, not to fight but to try to create space, to allow air into her lungs. She could feel herself weakening, her vision beginning to gray at the edges, her body screaming for oxygen. Please, she managed to gasp. Can't breathe. You can talk, you can breathe. It was a lie that had been repeated so many times, it had become an article of faith among certain officers, a justification for maintaining pressure on necks and chests while victims pleaded for their lives. The truth, which Jasmine knew from her medical training, was that speaking required far less air than surviving. People could speak their final words while dying. George Floyd had proven that to the world. But Thornton either didn't know or didn't care. She was going to die. The realization came with a strange clarity, cutting through the panic and the pain. She was going to die in a gas station parking lot, killed by a police officer who had decided that her skin color made her a threat, Her body left on the concrete while the world moved on without her. She thought of her mother in Chicago, who had sacrificed everything to give her children better lives. She thought of her soldiers, the men and women she had led into combat and brought home safely. She thought of all the things she had planned to do when she finally retired. The peaceful life she had imagined for herself after years of war. And then she heard the voice. "Hey, what the hell are you doing?" The pressure on her throat lessened slightly as Thornton turned toward the source of the interruption. Jasmine gulped air, her lungs burning, her vision slowly clearing. She could see a man approaching, young and black, holding a phone in his hand, its camera clearly recording. "Back off," Thornton snarled. "This is police business. This is assault, man. I'm recording everything. The whole world is gonna see this." "I said back off." More voices now, other customers at the gas station gathering, drawn by the commotion. An elderly white woman was shouting something about calling 911. A Latino man was blocking the exit with his truck, preventing any escape. The teenager who had been gathering with friends near the air pump was streaming live to social media, his phone held high to capture everything. Thornton released Jasmine's throat but kept his grip on her arm, his face now showing the first signs of uncertainty. The situation had spiraled beyond his control, had attracted witnesses and cameras and the accountability he had thought he could avoid. "Everyone needs to leave," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "This is an active investigation." "Investigation of what?" the young man with the phone demanded. "She was filling her gas tank. You came up and started choking her. We all saw it. She was resisting arrest." "Arrest for what? What did she do?" Thornton had no answer. The pretext about the robbery had collapsed under the weight of witnesses who had seen the entire encounter, who knew that Jasmine had done nothing but fill her tank and ask questions. He was exposed, his abuse captured on multiple cameras, his career hanging by a thread. And that was when the situation took its final turn. Jasmine, still gasping for breath, reached slowly into her pocket and pulled out the one piece of identification she had hoped she wouldn't need to use. "Officer Thornton," she said, her diaciacio voice raspy from the damage to her throat. "I'm going to reach for something in my pocket. It's not a weapon. It's identification." She produced a small leather case and flipped it open, revealing the credentials inside. Thornton's face went pale. The credentials identified Jasmine Washington as an operator with the 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta, with clearances and authorizations that exceeded anything a county police officer would ever encounter. The case also contained a card with emergency contact numbers for the Department of Defense, the FBI, and the Secret Service, the kind of numbers that got answered immediately regardless of the hour. "I told you," Jasmine said quietly. "I'm in the military. And now you have a choice to make. You can release me, apologize, and hope that I'm too tired to pursue this further. Or you can continue down this path and find out what happens when you assault someone with my connections." The gas station was silent. Every person present was watching, phone still recording, waiting to see what would happen next. Thornton stood frozen, his hand still on Jasmine's arm, his mind clearly struggling to process the magnitude of his error. He released her. "This isn't over," he said. But there was no conviction in his voice. "You're right," Jasmine agreed. "It's not." She pulled out her own phone and dialed a number from memory. The call was answered on the first ring. "This is Sergeant First Class Washington. Authentications. Code November Whiskey 734. I need to report an assault by a law enforcement officer. I'm at the Shell station on MLK and Highway 78 in Decatur, Georgia. The officer's name is Thornton, DeKalb County Police. I'm fine, but I need support here immediately." She ended the call and looked at Thornton with eyes that had seen things he couldn't imagine, that had made decisions that would haunt her forever, that had never once blinked in the face of enemies far more dangerous than him. "Help is coming," she said. "For both of us." The first backup units arrived within 4 minutes, 2 DeKalb County patrol cars responding to the call that Thornton had apparently made before approaching Jasmine. But they were followed almost immediately by vehicles that drew stares from everyone at the station. Black SUVs with government plates, carrying men and women in suits who showed badges that made the county officers step back with wide eyes. The Army Criminal Investigation Division had dispatched a team from Fort McPherson. The FBI had sent agents from the Atlanta field office. The Department of Defense had activated protocols that existed precisely for situations like this, when military personnel with sensitive positions were threatened by local law enforcement. Within 15 minutes, the gas station had become a command center, with uniformed officers and federal agents sorting through witness statements, reviewing footage from the multiple phones that had captured the encounter, and trying to piece together exactly what had happened and why. Jasmine sat in the back of an ambulance, an EMT examining the bruises already forming on her throat. The damage was significant but not permanent, a result of training that had taught her how to survive chokeholds and the luck of intervention before Thornton could complete what he had started. A woman in her 50s approached, wearing a navy blue suit and carrying herself with the bearing of someone accustomed to authority. Her badge identified her as Special Agent Carolyn Hughes of the FBI's Civil Rights Division. "Sergeant Washington? I'm Agent Hughes. I'm leading the federal investigation into what happened tonight. How are you feeling?" "I've felt better, but I'll survive." Hughes nodded, her expression grim. "What Officer Thornton did to you is a federal crime. Assault under color of law, deprivation of civil rights, possibly attempted murder depending on the medical findings. He's going to be arrested, charged, and prosecuted. I want you to know that. I appreciate that. But I've been in law enforcement's hands before. I've seen how these cases go. Officers get suspended with pay, cases get delayed, juries decide that fear for their lives justified everything. That's not going to happen here." Hughes's voice was firm. "You're not just any victim, Sergeant. You're a decorated special operations soldier who was assaulted on video while doing nothing but filling her gas tank. The footage is already all over social media. Millions of people have seen it. There's no scenario where Officer Thornton walks away from this." Jasmine looked past Hughes to where Thornton was standing beside his patrol car, surrounded by federal agents and his own supervisors. He looked smaller now, diminished, the aggressive confidence of an hour ago replaced by the dawning realization that his life was about to change dramatically. What happens to him now? He's being placed under arrest as we speak. He'll be processed at the county jail tonight and arraigned tomorrow morning. Federal charges will be filed within the week. Given the evidence and the video footage, I expect this case to move quickly. And what about me? Hughes's expression softened slightly. You're free to go whenever the EMTs clear you. But I'd like you to come to our field office tomorrow to give a formal statement. We'll need your testimony to build the strongest possible case. I'll be there." Hughes nodded and turned to go, then paused. "Sergeant Washington? For what it's worth, I'm sorry this happened to you. I know that doesn't mean much, but I wanted you to hear it. What you've accomplished in your career, the service you've given to this country, you deserved better than this. Everyone deserves better than this," Jasmine said quietly. "That's kind of the point." She watched as Thornton was handcuffed and led to a federal vehicle, his badge and weapon already confiscated, his career ending in the same parking lot where he had begun his assault. The crowd of witnesses cheered as he was driven away, their phones still recording, their voices adding commentary that would spread across social media in the hours to come. The young man who had first intervened approached the ambulance, his phone finally lowered. "Hey, I'm Marcus. I'm the one who started recording. I just wanted to make sure you were okay." Jasmine extended her hand. "Jasmine, thank you for what you did. You might have saved my life. I just did what anyone should do. I couldn't stand there and watch him choke you. A lot of people would have. A lot of people do every day. You didn't. That matters." Marcus shook her hand, his grip firm but gentle. "My younger brother got stopped by cops last year. They roughed him up pretty bad, and nobody did anything. I promised myself that if I ever saw something like that happening, I wouldn't be a bystander. Your brother is lucky to have you. Nah, I'm lucky to have him. He's the one who taught me to stand up." Marcus smiled, a genuine expression that cut through the tension of the evening. "You take care of yourself, Jasmine. And thank you for your service. I mean that." He walked away, rejoining his friends, leaving Jasmine alone with her thoughts and her injuries. The EMT finished his examination and recommended that she visit a hospital for further evaluation, but cleared her to leave if she preferred. She preferred. She got back into her Charger, still parked at Pump 4, her tank now full from the gas that had continued flowing during the entire encounter. She sat for a moment, hands on the steering wheel, processing everything that had happened. 14 years of service, combat deployments to the world's most dangerous places, missions that would remain classified forever. And she had nearly died in a gas station parking lot, killed by a man who was supposed to protect and serve, who had seen her skin color and decided that made her a threat. She thought about all the black women who didn't have her training, her credentials, her connections. Women who faced officers like Thornton every day and didn't have the resources to fight back, to summon federal agents, to ensure that their attackers faced consequences. Women who simply had to endure, to survive, to pick themselves up and keep going no matter how many times they were knocked down. She started the car and pulled out of the station, leaving behind the flashing lights and the gathering crowd and the scene of her assault. She had a long drive ahead of her, back to Fort Bragg, back to the life she had built, back to the soldiers who depended on her leadership. But first, she had something to do. She pulled over a few blocks from the station and took out her phone. The videos of her assault were already everywhere, viewed millions of times, shared across every platform. The comments were what she expected. Outrage and support mixed with denial and victim blaming. The predictable responses of a nation still struggling to confront its deepest wounds. She opened her own social media account, one she rarely used, and began to type. "My name is Jasmine Washington. I'm a Sergeant First Class in the United States Army, currently serving with one of our nation's most elite special operations units. Tonight, I was assaulted by a police officer while filling my gas tank. He choked me until I couldn't breathe. He did this because I'm a black woman in America, and that made me suspicious in his eyes." She paused, considering her next words carefully. "I survived tonight because of bystanders who refused to look away, who recorded what was happening, who intervened when they could have stayed silent. I survived because of the training that taught me to stay calm when every instinct screamed to fight back. And I survived because of the credentials that gave me access to resources that most people don't have. But not everyone survives. George Floyd didn't survive. Breonna Taylor didn't survive. Too many black women and men have died at the hands of officers who saw their skin color as a threat, who used their badges as weapons, who faced no consequences for their violence. Tonight, an officer will face consequences. He has been arrested on federal charges. He will be prosecuted, and I will be there every step of the way to ensure that he is held accountable. But one case isn't enough. One arrest doesn't change a system. What happened to me tonight happens to someone somewhere in this country every single day. And until we change the culture that produces officers like the one who attacked me, until we reform the institutions that protect them, until we build a world where every citizen is treated with dignity regardless of their skin color, the work isn't finished. I've spent 14 years fighting for this country. Tonight reminded me that the fight isn't just overseas. It's here, in our own communities, in our own streets. And I'm not going to stop fighting until the job is done." She posted the message and put her phone away. Tomorrow she would give her statement to the FBI. Tomorrow she would begin the long process of seeking justice. Tomorrow she would return to her unit and her soldiers and the mission that had defined her life for so long. But tonight she was just a woman trying to get home after a long journey. A woman who had survived another battle, in a war that never seemed to end. She put the car in a gear and drove into the darkness, the lights of Atlanta glowing on the horizon. A city full of people living their lives, most of them unaware of the struggles that played out in gas stations and traffic stops, and all the small spaces where power and prejudice collided. The fight continued. It always would. But Jasmine Washington had been fighting her whole life, and she wasn't about to stop now. The trial of Officer Brian Thornton began 7 months after the gas station assault in a federal courthouse in downtown Atlanta that had become a focal point for national attention. The case had grown beyond a single incident of police brutality into a symbol of the broader struggle for accountability in law enforcement, drawing activists and journalists and observers from across the country. Jasmine had spent those 7 months rebuilding her life. The physical injuries had healed within weeks, the bruises fading, her voice returning to normal. But the psychological wounds were deeper and more persistent. She found herself hypervigilant in public spaces, scanning for threats that weren't there, flinching at the sight of police cars. She started seeing a therapist at Fort Bragg, a former special operations psychologist who understood the unique challenges of her situation. She also became an advocate. The post she had written on the night of her assault had been shared millions of times, had sparked conversations about police violence against black women, had drawn attention to